The crystalline spires of Eldoria, shimmering against the sapphire sky, offered no solace to Ilara, only a stark reminder of the world that had cast her out. Each day dawned with the biting chill of loneliness, a constant companion to the harsh whispers that followed her like a shadow, half-elf, an abomination, a stain on the ancient purity of their kingdom. Her existence was a tapestry woven from prejudice and neglect, a life lived on the forgotten fringes where survival was a daily battle and acceptance an impossible dream. She carried the weight of a heritage she never chose, a fractured lineage that branded her as an outsider in the very land of her birth. Her heart a raw wound beneath a facade of weary resignation. This crushing isolation was her normal, a silent scream in a world that refused to hear, echoing through the shadowed valleys of her solitary life. Her days were a relentless, grinding struggle, each sunrise bringing new demands on her meager resources and diminishing hope. The echoes of a past she never chose, filled with the sting of rejection and the burden of unspoken blame, resonated in the quiet solitude of her humble dwelling, a sanctuary as much as it was a prison. Comenta de donde nos ves y suscríbete, porque esta historia apenas comienza. Ahora sí, continuemos. Her calloused hands spoke of a life devoid of tenderness. Yet beneath Ilara's hardened exterior beat a heart fiercely compassionate, a silent defiance against the world's indifference. She yearned for a place to belong, for a love that could see beyond the fractured lineage that defined her in the eyes of others. A desperate, hidden desire flickering like a fragile flame. Her resilience was born of necessity, but her spirit, though weary, refused to break. Every night, as twilight's velvet cloak descended upon Eldoria, Ilara defied the paralyzing grip of fear and the icy voice of reason. Deep within the cursed, whispering woods, where ancient magic tangled with forgotten sorrow, she undertook a clandestine act of selfless kindness. A small, ethereal fey child, whose wide, luminous eyes held the universe's untold grief and whose tiny form hummed with forgotten magic, awaited her meager sustenance. This secret ritual, fraught with peril and the constant threat of discovery, forged an unspoken bond between them, a fragile, dangerous connection that transcended words and linked her to a world far grander and more perilous than her own solitary existence. She knew little of its origins, only its desperate hunger and the silent plea that resonated within her soul. This nightly pilgrimage into the shadowed depths of the woods was a dance with destiny, each rustle of leaves, each snapping twig, a potential harbinger of doom. The cursed woods, shunned by all elves, were a labyrinth of ancient spirits and forgotten dangers, yet Ilara faced them without hesitation, driven by a compassion that outweighed her own desperate need for safety. The fragile peace of her solitary life, built on careful avoidance and quiet endurance, was already a precarious construct, constantly threatened by the very air she breathed in, Eldoria. She understood, with a chilling certainty, that her connection to the Fey child was a thread pulled taut, ready to snap, unaware that this simple act would irrevocably shatter the delicate balance of her existence. Then, one moonless night, the silence of her humble dwelling was not merely broken, but shattered. A chilling stillness preceded the thunderous arrival, a palpable shift in the air that prickled her skin with dread. The formidable Elven King's Silver Guard, an elite force whose very name evoked both awe and terror, descended upon her isolated home like a predatory storm. Led by Commander Kalen, a warrior whose legend was etched in the annals of Eldoria, his presence a towering edifice of icy resolve, they came not with an invitation, but with an unspoken threat that hung heavy in the frigid night air. Ilara's breath hitched, her heart hammering against her ribs, realizing her world, fragile as it was, had just irrevocably changed. Ilara's earliest memories were not of a mother's gentle touch or a father's protective embrace, but of the searing sting of silence and averted gazes. Born from a forbidden union, her very existence was a whispered curse in Eldoria, a kingdom that prized purity above all else. She was a living dichotomy, her elven grace marred by the subtle human softness of her features, a constant visual reminder of a transgression no one dared speak of directly. From the moment she could understand, she learned the language of exclusion, the cold shoulder of the village elders, the children who pointed and whispered, their innocent cruelty sharper than any blade. This profound foundational rejection hollowed out a space in her young heart, a perpetual ache that no amount of solitude could truly soothe, a void where belonging should have blossomed. The abandonment was not a sudden, dramatic severance, but a slow, agonizing bleed. Her elven parent, bound by duty or shame, vanished early from her life, leaving her to navigate a hostile world alone, burdened by a heritage that offered no comfort, only condemnation. The Fey child was not her first connection to a fragile, vulnerable being. She herself had once been that forgotten, helpless creature, longing for a hand that never came. This deep-seated wound, festering beneath years of forced resilience, taught her that attachment was a luxury she could not afford, a weakness that would only lead to further pain. Every kindness she witnessed, every loving glance exchanged between others, served only to deepen the chasm of her own isolation, reinforcing the bitter truth that she was fundamentally unworthy of such simple human warmth, unworthy of love. Her life became a constant exercise in self-sufficiency, a defiant refusal to break despite the relentless pressure. The contempt she faced was a tangible weight, pressing down on her spirit, forcing her into the forgotten corners of Eldoria where she could exist without constantly being reminded of her impurity. She bore the brunt of every petty slight, every dismissive gesture, her dignity slowly eroding under the relentless tide of prejudice. There was no one to champion her cause, no one to offer solace or a moment of respite from the constant battle for basic respect. This entrenched disdain, woven into the very fabric of society, ensured that her life was not merely solitary, but perpetually overshadowed by the crushing realization that she was seen as less than, an unfortunate anomaly, a burden on the very air they breathed. To dream of romance, of a shared life, was a dangerous folly Ilara had long since banished from her weary mind. How could she, a creature branded by rejection and steeped in the bitter wine of solitude, ever hope to attract genuine affection? Who would willingly choose a half-elf, an outcast, when Eldoria's pure-blooded elves gleamed with unblemished lineage and coveted status? Her fears were deeply rooted in a lifetime of being told, implicitly and explicitly, that she was undesirable, a flaw in the perfect tapestry of elven society. The very idea of opening her heart to another, of exposing her raw, vulnerable core to potential heartbreak, was a terrifying prospect. She knew with a chilling certainty that any love offered to her would be fleeting, conditional, and ultimately a painful illusion destined to crumble. Years of emotional bruising had forged an impenetrable shield around Ilara's heart, a defense mechanism born of necessity. She had learned to internalize the whispers, to brace herself for the inevitable pain, to build walls so high that no one, not even she, could easily breach them. This self-preservation came at a cost, however, isolating her further, severing any chance of genuine connection before it could even begin. Her vulnerability was a weapon others had wielded against her, and she vowed never to give them that power again. Every interaction was carefully measured, every word guarded, ensuring that no one could ever again inflict the deep, scarring wounds of her past. She existed in a state of perpetual emotional lockdown, convinced it was the only way to survive. The sudden, brutal intrusion of Commander Kalen and the Silver Guard had ripped through her carefully constructed world, leaving gaping holes in her defenses. The icy resolve in Kalen's eyes, the silent authority radiating from him, spoke of a power far beyond anything she had ever encountered, a force that simply took without asking. Her heart still pounded with a primal fear, a terrified recognition that her fragile peace had been irrevocably shattered, and she was utterly powerless to reclaim it. The unspoken threat in their presence was a suffocating blanket, stealing her breath and clouding her thoughts. She knew with a dreadful certainty that whatever their purpose, it would demand a price she could ill afford, pulling her further into a vortex of danger and uncertainty. Before she could even fully comprehend the magnitude of their arrival or the chilling implications of Kalen's silent command, Ilara found herself roughly but efficiently escorted from her humble dwelling. The familiar, comforting darkness of the cursed woods receded behind her, replaced by the ominous glow of Eldoria's spires, now looming not as a distant, indifferent backdrop, but as a terrifying, imminent destination. She was a captive, a pawn, propelled forward by forces she could not fathom, her mind reeling with a desperate, burgeoning fear. What did this powerful warrior want with her? The half-elf outcast, what terrible fate awaited her within the hallowed, forbidden walls of the Elven King's domain? Her past had been a prison, but this new journey felt like an execution. En este canal, traigo las historias de romance más épicas e intensas. Cada semana, un nuevo mundo, una nueva pasión imposible. Ilara was not led to a dungeon, as her terrified mind had conjured, but through a labyrinth of polished marble and whispering silk, the opulent grandeur of the Elven King's palace, a stark, suffocating contrast to her rustic dwelling. Finally, she was ushered into a chamber where the air itself seemed to crackle with power. There, bathed in the cool light filtering through a towering stained-glass window, stood Commander Kalen. He was an imposing figure, taller than she remembered, his frame sculpted by years of rigorous training, clad in dark, intricate armor that seemed to drink the light. His silver hair, almost white, framed a face chiseled with a warrior's sternness, yet haunted by an unspoken weariness. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, held an intensity that could freeze blood, but also a flicker of something profoundly ancient, profoundly burdened. He was Eldoria's shield, but also its silent sentinel, and carrying the weight of a kingdom on his broad shoulders. The weight Kalen bore was not merely the physical burden of his armor, but the crushing responsibility of Eldoria's very existence, a kingdom teetering on the precipice of an ancient, devastating war. For generations, the delicate peace with the enigmatic Fey courts had been maintained by fragile treaties and wary diplomacy, but now a rift had formed, widening with each passing moon. Whispers of Fey retribution for a perceived slight, ancient magic stirring in the cursed woods, and the king's own failing health had placed Kalen, as the revered Silver Guard commander, at the epicenter of a political maelstrom. The Elven Council, rigid in their traditions, offered no solutions, only demands for strength and purity, blind to the encroaching darkness. Kalen knew that without a desperate intervention, the crystalline spires of Eldoria, his home, would soon crumble into dust. Beneath the formidable facade of the unwavering commander, a profound solitude gnawed at Kalen's core. He was a man defined by duty, by sacrifice, and by a loss so deep it had carved an unfillable void within him. His earliest memories were of rigorous training and the stern expectations of a lineage sworn to protect, but also of a sudden, brutal severance, a void left by a cherished life, extinguished too soon. This was the source of his hidden vulnerability, a wound that never truly healed, driving him with a relentless, almost desperate need to protect the vulnerable. His destiny, as he saw it, was not one of personal happiness, but of tireless guardianship. A lonely path walked in the shadows of expectation and ancient prophecy. He feared not death, but failure. The failure to protect his people, to honor the memory of what he had lost, to secure a future he himself might never truly inhabit. This immense burden, this impending catastrophe, was precisely why Kaelin needed Ilara, the half-elf outcast. Her clandestine visits to the cursed woods, her selfless act of sustaining the Fey child, had not gone unnoticed. The child, it turned out, was no ordinary Fey. It was a vulnerable Fey prince, a linchpin in the delicate balance of power, whose survival was paramount to preventing the devastating war. Ilara's unique connection to this ethereal being, forged through an act of pure, unbidden compassion, was the one unforeseen variable, the crucial, improbable key to an ancient prophecy. She was not merely a witness to a secret, but a vital, unwilling piece in a desperate gambit, a bridge between two warring worlds that only her fractured lineage and pure heart could possibly span. The audacity of Kaelin's solution, a desperate measure born of sheer necessity, was nothing short of shocking. A marriage of convenience. The king, swayed by the dire warnings and ancient texts Kaelin had unearthed, had decreed it. Ilara, the scorned half-elf, was to become the consort to the legendary Silver Guard. Her unique bond with the Fey Prince deemed essential to a binding pact, a magical ritual designed to stabilize Eldoria and secure the future of the vulnerable Fey. This was not a request, but a royal command, transforming her from an invisible outcast to an unwilling pawn in a high-stakes game of power and survival. Her very compassion had woven her into a tapestry of destiny, irrevocably entwining her fate with Kaelin's and the future of two ancient, warring races. Kaelin's gaze, piercing and unwavering, finally met hers across the grand chamber. There was no warmth, no flicker of welcome, only a stark, unyielding resolve that sent a shiver down Ilara's spine. He spoke, his voice deep and resonant, cutting through the heavy silence like a honed blade. "Bring her to my private chambers," he commanded, his words echoing with an authority that left no room for question or defiance. Ilara's breath hitched, her heart leaping into her throat. Her mind, still reeling from the shock of her capture and the bewildering opulence surrounding her, could only process one terrifying thought: punishment. She was to be punished for her kindness, for her very existence, and the weight of that impending doom threatened to crush her fragile spirit entirely. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped within a cage as Kaelin's command echoed in the opulent chamber. The Silver Guard moved with silent efficiency, guiding her through an ornate doorway she hadn't noticed before, into a private space that felt both intimate and utterly intimidating. This was no dungeon, but a sanctuary of power, where rich tapestries depicting ancient elven victories adorned the walls, and a large, unlit fireplace dominated one end. The air, thick with the scent of old parchment and rare wood, seemed to hum with Kaelin's formidable presence. He stood before a vast mahogany desk, his back to her, an imposing silhouette against the moon-drenched window, his broad shoulders conveying a silent, immense burden. His very stillness was a challenge, a testament to his controlled power, and Ilara felt herself shrink under the weight of his unspoken authority, dreading the moment he would turn. On this channel, I bring you the most epic and intense romance stories. Every week, a new world, a new, impossible passion. When Kaelin finally turned, his gaze, a glacial blue, pierced through her, stripping away her defenses. He moved from behind the desk, his movements fluid and precise, stopping mere feet from her, an invasion of her personal space that left her breathless. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, an almost physical force field between them. His voice, when he spoke, was a low rumble, devoid of emotion, yet heavy with a gravitas that commanded absolute attention. "Eldoria," he began, his eyes fixed on hers, stands on the precipice of ruin. The fragile peace with the Fae is shattered, the ancient treaties mere dust, the king weakened by illness and age, who can no longer command the necessary authority, and the elven council, blinded by tradition and their own rigid dogma, sees only the past, not the encroaching storm. His words painted a grim picture, a kingdom hurtling towards an inevitable, devastating war, and the profound weariness in his eyes hinted at the solitary burden he carried. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle, his gaze never leaving her face, as if searching for something within her. "The Fae child you sheltered," he continued, his voice softer, a subtle shift that sent a shiver down Ilara's spine, "is not merely a child. He is a Fae prince, the last scion of a powerful lineage, and his survival is paramount. His fate, and by extension Eldoria's, is inextricably linked to an ancient prophecy, a delicate balance that has been disturbed." A flicker of raw, deeply buried vulnerability crossed his features, a fleeting glimpse into the profound loss that fueled his relentless drive. "My destiny," he stated, his voice regaining its steely resolve, "has always been to protect this kingdom, to safeguard its future. I bear the weight of a sacred oath, a predestination that demands unwavering sacrifice, and I will not fail." Ilara could only stare, her mind reeling, trying to process the enormity of his revelation. The Fae child, a prince, a prophecy, her, connected to it all. Before she could voice her confusion, Kaelin delivered the final devastating blow. The king, after much deliberation and against the council's vehement objections, has decreed a solution. His eyes, usually unreadable, held a flicker of something akin to grim resignation. "You, Ilara, the half-elf outcast, are to become my consort. A marriage of convenience, a temporary alliance, a binding pact decreed by ancient law, designed to stabilize Eldoria and secure the future of the Fae prince." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp, striking Ilara with the force of a physical blow, leaving her utterly breathless and numb. "Your unique heritage," Kaelin explained, his voice losing none of its solemnity, "once seen as a curse, is now the unexpected key. Your dual blood, your connection to both the elven world and the Fae child, makes you the only one who can bridge this chasm. The prophecy speaks of a fractured heart that will mend the ancient divide, and your selfless act in the cursed woods has proven you to be that bridge." He gestured vaguely towards the window, as if indicating the vast, warring forces beyond. "The ritual requires a bond, a union rooted in compassion and trust, something the pure-blooded elves, with their inherent distrust of the Fae, cannot provide. You are not merely a pawn, Ilara, you are the catalyst, the vital, unwilling piece in a desperate gambit to prevent utter annihilation." Ilara's mind raced, a whirlwind of fear, indignation, and a strange, unsettling flicker of something akin to purpose. This was madness, yet his words resonated with a terrifying logic. Kaelin, observing her turmoil, continued, his voice shifting slightly, introducing the pragmatic aspect of his proposal. "In return," he stated, his gaze unwavering, "you will be afforded protection. The whispers will cease, the contempt will be banished. You will have a place within these walls, a home, however temporary, free from the daily struggle and the biting chill of loneliness you have known your entire life. Your existence will be recognized, validated. You will be safe, Ilara, and you will never again be truly alone, even if our union is merely a facade." He was offering her the very thing she had secretly yearned for, wrapped in the bitter pill of coercion. The audacity of his proposal left Ilara reeling. To be forced into a marriage with the legendary Silver Guard, a man who embodied everything her world rejected, was an unthinkable indignity. Yet the tantalizing promise of safety, of a reprieve from the relentless prejudice and the gnawing solitude, whispered to the deepest, most wounded parts of her soul. Her past, a tapestry of rejection and pain, screamed at her to refuse, to flee, to cling to her hard-won independence, however bleak. But the image of the fey child, vulnerable and trusting, flickered in her mind, alongside the chilling certainty that Kaelin's words held undeniable truth. This was not just about her. It was about something far greater, a burden she had unknowingly taken on. Her gaze, which had been fixed on the intricate patterns of the rug, slowly lifted to meet Kaelin's, a defiant spark igniting within her weary eyes. The raw fear was still there, a trembling beneath her skin, but it was now tempered by a burgeoning resolve, a fierce protectiveness she hadn't known she possessed. She drew a shaky breath, her voice, though soft, carrying an unexpected strength. I will accept," Ilara finally conceded, the words feeling foreign on her tongue, but not without a condition. Kaelin's stern facade flickered, a subtle shift in his expression betraying a hint of surprise, perhaps even curiosity. "The Fey child," she continued, her gaze unwavering, "he must remain under my care, and I will have access to him always. If this is to be a true alliance, Commander, then he is my responsibility." Ilara's reluctant acceptance, born of fierce protectiveness for the Fey child, solidified into a grim resolve. The weight of Kaelin's words, the chilling prophecy, and the dire fate of Eldoria now rested heavily on her shoulders, a burden far greater than any she had ever known. She had traded her quiet solitude for a gilded cage, her anonymity for a public spectacle, all for a child she barely knew but whose vulnerability mirrored her own. Her heart, a battlefield of fear and an unexpected flicker of defiant purpose, braced itself for the inevitable. The ancient halls of the palace, once a symbol of her rejection, now awaited her unwilling assent to a role she never desired. A union forged in desperation and cloaked in ancient magic. This was no dream, but a waking nightmare. Yet a small, insistent voice within her whispered that perhaps, just perhaps, this impossible path held a purpose. En este canal traigo las historias de romance más épicas e intensas. Cada semana, un nuevo mundo, una nueva pasión imposible. The ceremony itself was a blur of ancient rites and hushed whispers, a stark contrast to the quiet intimacy Ilara had imagined a union to be, stripped of her simple clothes and adorned in heavy, unfamiliar silks. She felt like a sacrificial offering rather than a bride. Before the Elven King, a frail figure whose eyes held the wisdom of ages and the weariness of impending war, Kaelin stood impassive, a pillar of unyielding strength. The air crackled with a palpable tension, a mix of reverence and thinly veiled disdain from the assembled nobles. Each chanted word, each ritualistic gesture, bound her not just to Kaelin, but to the very fate of Eldoria, irrevocably sealing her new, terrifying destiny. There was no escape, only the stark reality of her forced ascent to a position she neither understood nor truly desired, her heart a drumbeat of apprehension. The reactions of the court were a venomous ballet of averted gazes and sharp, judgmental whispers. Ilara, accustomed to the sting of prejudice, felt the collective weight of their disdain press down upon her, a suffocating blanket woven from centuries of pure-blood pride. The matriarchs of the noble houses, their faces a mask of icy disapproval, saw not a savior but an abomination, a half-breed stain on the sacred lineage of the Silver Guard. Their eyes, like polished daggers, pierced her, condemning her very presence within these hallowed halls. This public display of contempt, a stark reminder of her unworthiness, hammered home the truth. This marriage, though sanctioned by the king, would never earn her true acceptance. It was a union of necessity, not love, and the court would ensure she never forgot it, their silent accusations echoing in the vast chamber. Among the throng, Lady Seraphina, a vision of pristine elven beauty and Kaelin's long-presumed match, watched with a gaze that could curdle milk. Her perfectly sculpted features, usually serene, were now contorted with a barely concealed fury, her grip on her delicate fan so tight her knuckles blanched. Seraphina had courted Kaelin for years, her lineage impeccable, her ambition unwavering. Seeing herself as the rightful queen of Eldoria by his side, to have this half-elf, this blight on their ancient traditions, usurp her destined place, was an unforgivable affront. Her mind, a labyrinth of intricate schemes, immediately began to plot, a venomous seed of revenge taking root, promising to make Ilara's life within the palace a living hell. The fragile alliance was already under attack, its foundations undermined by bitter resentment and simmering envy. Kaelin, throughout the entire ordeal, remained a fortress of stoicism, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed distantly on the ancient runes adorning the high ceiling. No flicker of emotion betrayed the immense pressure he bore, the profound loss that fueled his unwavering dedication to Eldoria. Yet, Ilara, keenly attuned to unspoken vulnerabilities, sensed a profound weariness beneath his controlled facade, a silent battle waged within his warrior's heart. He was a man trapped by destiny, bound by duty, and now by a desperate, unconventional marriage that would surely invite further scorn. His hands, resting lightly on the ceremonial sword at his hip, were steady, but the slight tension in his jaw, the subtle tightening of his broad shoulders, spoke volumes of the silent torment he endured, a warrior sacrificing everything for his people. The climax of the ceremony arrived with the binding of hands. A priestess, her ancient voice resonating with power, recited vows steeped in Eldorian tradition and fey magic, invoking ancient spirits and primordial forces. As Ilara's trembling hand was placed in Kaelin's, a jolt, sharp and unexpected, coursed through her. His skin, cool and firm against hers, was not merely flesh, but a conduit for something raw and potent, a surge of energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. It was not gentle, nor overtly intimate, yet the sheer force of the connection was undeniable, a powerful current passing between them that transcended the ceremonial act. The air in the chamber seemed to thicken, a silent testament to the profound magical and emotional weight of the union now forged, sealing their fates with an invisible, unbreakable chain. Then came the formal kiss, a gesture meant to solidify the pact, yet it became something far more. Kaelin's large hand cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing lightly against her cheekbone, a fleeting, almost imperceptible touch that sent a shiver through Ilara. His eyes, usually glacial, held a sudden, intense depth as he leaned in, his breath warm against her lips. The kiss itself was brief, chaste, a mere press of lips, yet it was imbued with an unexpected gravity. It was a promise, a burden, and a spark all at once. For a fleeting moment, the world outside them vanished, and Ilara felt a strange, terrifying connection, a silent acknowledgement of the desperate journey they were embarking upon together. This was not merely a ceremonial act, it was the forging of an unforeseen, dangerous intimacy. Ilara's breath hitched, a silent gasp caught in her throat as Kaelin pulled away. The ghost of his touch lingered on her skin, a phantom warmth that defied the cold reality of their arrangement. Her mind, usually so guarded, reeled with a dizzying mix of fear, confusion, and a terrifying, undeniable tremor of something akin to curiosity. The kiss, meant to be a cold, contractual seal, had instead ignited a spark within her, a tiny, dangerous flame in the vast emptiness of her heart. This warrior, this enigma, had breached her carefully constructed defenses with a single, fleeting gesture, hinting at a depth she hadn't anticipated. She was no longer just a pawn. She was a woman whose carefully cultivated emotional lockdown had been subtly, irrevocably challenged, leaving her vulnerable and profoundly unsettled. Kaelin's stoic mask, though quickly reasserted, had fractured for a precious second. His eyes, as they met hers after the kiss, held a fleeting glimpse of something raw and exposed, a profound weariness, perhaps, or a flicker of unexpected vulnerability that mirrored her own. It was a silent acknowledgement of the impossible path they were forced to walk, a shared burden that transcended the political machinations surrounding them. The air between them, once thick with tension, now hummed with a new, dangerous undercurrent, a nascent awareness that this agreement, this forced proximity, would inevitably lead them into uncharted emotional territory. This was more than a binding pact. It was a collision of two solitary souls, destined to find something profound in the wreckage of their arranged fate. Si este tipo de historias te atrapan, suscríbete porque tengo muchas más. As the formal ceremony concluded, and the assembled nobles dispersed with their whispered judgments, Ilara found herself standing beside Kaelin, the weight of her new title, consort to the Silver Guard, pressing down on her. The agreement was sealed, the word spoken, the kiss exchanged, but the true implications of their union were only just beginning to unfold. The brush of his hand, the fleeting press of his lips, had ignited a terrifying realization. This was not merely a political arrangement. It was a dangerous, inescapable bond that threatened to unravel the carefully constructed walls around her heart, pulling her into a vortex of forbidden emotions and unforeseen intimacy. The path ahead was fraught with peril, promising not just political turmoil, but a profound, personal upheaval that would test the very limits of her resilience, irrevocably changing her forever. Ilara's days within the crystalline palace walls were a perplexing blend of suffocating luxury and biting disdain, a gilded cage where every polished surface reflected her isolation. She moved through the opulent halls like a ghost, her every step a stark reminder of her humble origins against the backdrop of ancient tapestries and whispering silks. The Fey child, now safely ensconced in a secluded, enchanted nursery, became her sole anchor, a fragile beacon of warmth in a world designed to freeze her out. Her routine now included secret visits to the prince, a quiet solace shared away from prying eyes, a connection that deepened with each passing day. Kaelin, ever present yet ever distant, loomed as a silent, imposing shadow, his glacial gaze a constant, unsettling presence that both intimidated and strangely, inexplicably, drew her in, making her hyper-aware of his formidable power and her own precarious position. The noble court, a viper's nest of ancient bloodlines and entrenched prejudice, made their collective disapproval acutely felt. During formal meals, their eyes, sharp and calculating, would slide over Ilara, dismissing her with a coldness that chilled her to the bone. Whispers, like venomous serpents, slithered through the grand dining hall, questioning her lineage, her worth, her very presence at Kaelin's side. Lady Seraphina, her beauty a weapon of icy perfection, would often direct pointed questions or veiled insults, her voice dripping with feigned politeness that barely concealed her seething resentment. Ilara, accustomed to such cruelty, held her head high, her hardened exterior a shield against their barbs, yet each slight was a fresh, internal wound, a testament to the enduring sting of her impurity. Amidst the constant barrage of subtle hostilities, Kaelin remained a fortress of stoic resolve, his presence a silent bulwark against the court's venom. Though he rarely spoke in her defense during these petty skirmishes, Ilara noticed the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the slight tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible clench of his hand on his goblet. One evening, as a particularly cutting remark from a minor lord hung in the air, Kaelin's winter sky eyes met Ilara's across the vast table. In that fleeting moment, a flicker of something unreadable passed between them. A silent acknowledgement, a shared burden. It was not warmth, not yet, but a powerful, unspoken solidarity that momentarily silenced the murmurs and left Ilara with a strange, dizzying sense of protection, an unexpected shield in the heart of the storm. Their forced proximity, initially a source of discomfort, began to carve out unexpected pockets of shared existence. Late one night, Ilara found Kaelin in the Fey Prince's nursery, his formidable frame hunched over the sleeping child, a rare, unguarded tenderness softening his stern features. He spoke of ancient Fey lore, his voice a low, melodic rumble, revealing a depth of knowledge and a quiet reverence she hadn't anticipated. Ilara, sitting on a plush rug, listened, captivated by the unexpected glimpse into his hidden world. The air between them, usually thick with unspoken tension, softened, becoming something fragile and almost intimate. It was a shared moment of quiet guardianship, a silent understanding that transcended their forced union, hinting at layers beneath his warrior's impenetrable exterior, a profound, hidden vulnerability he rarely, if ever, exposed. A nascent, dangerous playfulness began to emerge between them, small sparks in the vast, formal expanse of their lives. During a rare moment alone in the palace gardens, Ilara, observing Kaelin's usually severe expression, found herself teasing him about his overly serious demeanor, a daring act that surprised even herself. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a fleeting curve that transformed his chiseled face. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but the memory lingered, a warm ember in Ilara's heart. Another time, while discussing the Fey Prince's unusual magical manifestations, Kaelin offered a dry, witty comment that made Ilara laugh, a genuine, unrestrained sound that echoed strangely through the quiet corridors. These were brief, stolen moments, but they were cracks in the armor, revealing hints of the man beneath the legend. The Elven Council, a formidable assembly of ancient, unyielding purity, remained a constant, insidious threat. During a formal session, Ilara was summoned, not as a respected consort, but as an object of scrutiny. Elder Theron, his voice like grinding stones, questioned her knowledge of elven lore, her understanding of Fey customs, implicitly doubting her capacity to fulfill her role. His eyes, cold and dismissive, lingered on her slightly pointed ears, a subtle yet deliberate reminder of her mixed heritage. The other council members, arrayed in their ceremonial robes, watched with impassive faces, their silence a damning indictment. Ilara, though trembling internally, met their gazes with a quiet dignity, refusing to crumble under their collective judgment, her spirit hardened by a lifetime of prejudice. The public humiliation came swiftly and sharply. At a grand ball, a dazzling display of Eldorian wealth and power, Lady Seraphina, emboldened by wine and her entrenched status, approached Ilara with a sneer. "Tell me, consort," she purred, her voice carrying just enough to draw nearby attention. "Do your half-blood hands truly know how to grace a noble's arm, or are they more accustomed to digging for roots in the cursed earth?" The words, delivered with a saccharine smile, were a direct, public assault on Ilara's origins and station. A hush fell over the surrounding nobles, their eyes glinting with a morbid curiosity, eager to witness the half-elf's inevitable downfall. Ilara's breath hitched, her cheeks burning, the familiar sting of rejection tightening in her chest, threatening to shatter her composure entirely. Just as Ilara braced herself for the full force of the inevitable humiliation, a figure moved with lightning speed, stepping between her and Seraphina. Kaelin, his face a mask of glacial fury, his eyes blazing with an intensity that promised swift retribution, stood before her, a formidable shield. His voice, usually controlled, was a low, dangerous growl that resonated through the suddenly silent ballroom. "Lady Seraphina," he articulated, each word a shard of ice, "you forget yourself. The consort to the Silver Guard is due the respect of her station, a respect you would do well to remember." His gaze, sharp as a blade, swept over the assembled nobles, silencing their whispers and instilling a palpable fear. It was a fierce, public defense, a declaration of ownership and protection that left no room for doubt. Ilara's heart, which had been pounding with dread, now throbbed with a bewildering mix of emotions. Kaelin's defense, so swift and absolute, had caught her entirely off guard. A wave of profound gratitude washed over her, followed by a dizzying warmth that spread through her veins, chasing away the bitter chill of humiliation. She looked at his broad back, his shoulders tense with suppressed anger, and a startling realization bloomed in her chest. He had truly protected her, not out of mere duty, but with a fierce, almost possessive intensity. The walls she had painstakingly built around her heart began to tremble, a dangerous crack appearing in their formidable facade. This was more than an alliance. It was a bond, forging itself in the crucible of public scrutiny and shared adversity. Later that night, in the quiet solitude of Kaelin's private chambers, a palpable tension hung between them. Ilara, still reeling from the day's events, turned to him, her voice soft but imbued with a new, fragile vulnerability. "Kaelin," she began, her gaze searching his unreadable face. "That moment today, your defense, was it merely for appearance, for the sake of our pact?" She paused, gathering her courage, her voice barely a whisper. "Or are we truly just pretending?" His eyes, usually a cold steel, held a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher, a hint of weariness, a touch of vulnerability that mirrored her own, a silent acknowledgement of the thin line they walked. The question hung in the air, a dangerous bridge between duty and a burgeoning, forbidden emotion. Kaelin's response was not immediate, his silence heavy with unspoken meaning. He turned from the window, his gaze finally meeting hers, and for a fleeting moment, the stoic mask faltered. "Neither pact," he stated, his voice a low rumble, "requires a convincing facade, but a facade cannot hold a kingdom together. It demands more." He took a step closer, his presence commanding, yet his eyes held a rare, raw honesty. "My duty is to Eldoria, and you, Ilara, are now inextricably linked to its fate. My protection is not merely a performance, it is a necessity. And perhaps," he added, his voice dropping, "it is also something more than I anticipated. We are an alliance, Ilara, forged in fire, and in that fire something real may yet be born, whether we intend it or not. Their unspoken connection, once a fragile spark, now simmered beneath the surface, a dangerous current flowing between them, threatening to erode the carefully constructed walls of their pretend marriage." Just as Ilara began to process the profound implications of Kaelin's words, a new, chilling decree from the Elven Council swept through the palace, shattering their fragile peace. To further solidify the alliance and ensure the Fey Prince's safety, a grand ceremony of union and blessing was announced, requiring Kaelin and Ilara to undergo a public ritual of magical bonding, a deep, ancient pact that would expose their innermost beings, and most terrifyingly, confirm their capacity to produce an heir. The stakes had just been raised, threatening to pull them into an even deeper, more perilous deception, a public display of intimacy that would challenge the very core of their carefully guarded hearts. The decree for the ceremony of union and blessing plunged Ilara into a fresh abyss of despair, shattering the fragile truce she had begun to forge with her gilded cage. The idea of a magical bonding, a ritual to confirm her capacity for an heir, was a violation beyond anything she had imagined. She retreated into herself, the palace walls, once a distant threat, now closing in like a tomb. Lycan, equally burdened, seemed to withdraw into an even deeper stoicism, his presence a heavy, oppressive silence in their shared chambers. The unspoken chasm between them widened, filled with her fear and his impenetrable resolve. Each glance felt charged with accusation, each shared meal a silent torment. The fragile threads of their forced alliance threatened to snap under the unbearable weight of this new, terrifying demand, pushing them to the brink of emotional collapse. Ilara confronted him late one night, her voice trembling but resolute, the question hanging heavy in the opulent air. An heir, Lycan? Is that truly what this blessing demands? Are we to truly become a means to an end for your council's peace? Her words were sharp, laced with a pain that pierced his formidable composure. Lycan's jaw tightened, his gaze sweeping over the moonlit gardens visible through the tall window before finally settling on her. The Fae, he stated, his voice a low, strained rumble, demand more than a facade. They seek a true union, a magical confirmation of our intent, a bond that signifies unwavering commitment. The Council, in their desperation, sees this as the only path to avert war, to secure the prince's future. His admission was a bitter pill, revealing the depth of their inescapable deception and its horrifying implications. A cold dread settled in Ilara's stomach. "What aren't you telling me?" she pressed, her voice barely a whisper, sensing a deeper, more urgent truth. Lycan hesitated, a muscle twitching in his cheek, before revealing the full, devastating weight of their predicament. "The Fae Prince's magic," he began, his voice dropping. "Skakul is volatile, intricately linked to the ancient Fae-Elven pact. It is destabilizing, mirroring the growing rift. There is a deadline, Ilara, a specific alignment of stars, a sacred Fae ritual within the next 2 moons. If this ceremony of union is not completed, then, if the bond is not magically accepted, the prince's magic will unravel, unleashing a catastrophic surge that could tear Eldoria apart. The Council, blind to the true danger, merely sees an heir, but I see annihilation. The truth, stark and brutal, hung in the air, a sword poised over their heads. Ilara recoiled, the sheer enormity of his revelation pressing down on her, leaving her breathless. Not just a forced marriage, but a ticking clock, a catastrophic magical threat, and the terrifying prospect of a true, magically binding union. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and dawning understanding, met Lycan's. His own gaze held a raw, exposed vulnerability she had never seen before, mirroring her despair. "I would never choose this for either of us, Ilara," he confessed, his voice rough with suppressed emotion, a confession that felt dangerously close to a declaration. "If circumstances were different, if I were not bound by duty and the ghosts of my past, perhaps I would wish for a different path, for us both. But this is the only way. To protect Eldoria, to protect him, and in turn, to protect you from the chaos that will ensue." His words, though steeped in duty, carried an undeniable, agonizing tenderness, a glimpse of the man beneath the warrior's armor. The weight of Lycan's confession, a fragile bridge between their forced roles and burgeoning emotions, left Ilara deeply shaken. The moral dilemma clawed at her. How could she willingly participate in such a profound deception? A magical binding that would brand her forever, knowing it was merely a desperate means to an end. Yet the image of the vulnerable Fae Prince, the chilling prophecy of Eldoria's ruin, painted a future far more terrifying than her own personal sacrifice. She found herself preparing for the public ceremony with a heavy heart, donning the elaborate silks and ancient jewels, each piece feeling like a link in an unbreakable chain. Lycan, his face a mask of resolute control, watched her, his silent presence a testament to their shared, agonizing burden. They were two souls on the precipice, forced to betray their own hearts for the sake of a kingdom. The grand hall, usually a stage for courtly intrigue, now hummed with an ominous energy. Every noble, every elder of the council, every fey envoy present, their faces a mixture of expectation, apprehension, and thinly veiled judgment. Ilara, her hand resting lightly on Kaelin's arm, felt the tremor of his muscles beneath the silk of his uniform, a subtle sign of his immense pressure. The king, frail but dignified, sat upon his throne, his gaze fixed on the unfolding drama. A hushed silence fell as Elder Theron stepped forward, his voice booming through the chamber. "We are gathered here today for the ceremony of union and blessing, a sacred pact to secure the future of Eldoria and avert the impending war. And by the king's decree, a crucial announcement will precede the ritual, one that will forever alter the fate of our kingdom and the very nature of this alliance." The air crackled, pregnant with destiny, as Ilara's heart hammered, sensing their fragile world was about to be irrevocably shattered. Elder Theron's booming voice sliced through the charged silence, his pronouncement echoing ominously across the grand hall, drawing every eye to Ilara and Kaelin. "By ancient decree and the king's wisdom," Theron declared, his gaze sharp as obsidian piercing Ilara, "the Fey Prince's life force and Eldoria's stability is inextricably linked to the Fey Elven lineage. A magical anomaly, a wound in the pact, threatens chaos. This ceremony of union will not merely bind the consort and the commander politically, but will test their connection. It determines if the consort possesses the pure heart and untainted magic required to mend the rift, to secure an heir, a bridge capable of stabilizing the prince's volatile power." A collective gasp rippled through the court, their whispers turning into horrified outrage. The implication of Ilara's half-blood heritage, a blatant public challenge to her worth. This was the ultimate betrayal. As the venomous whispers swelled, threatening to engulf Ilara in public condemnation, Kaelin moved. His hand, warm and firm, suddenly enveloped hers, a silent, defiant gesture that instantly silenced the murmurs, drawing all attention to him. His glacial eyes, usually unreadable, now blazed with a fierce, protective fire, sweeping across the stunned faces of the council and court, settling finally on the enraged Seraphina. "The prophecy speaks not of purity of blood," Kaelin's voice resonated, deep and unwavering, cutting through the stunned silence like a sword, but of a fractured heart, a spirit capable of bridging worlds through compassion. "Ilara, my consort, has shown more selfless courage than any of you could comprehend. She is the true heart of this alliance, the destined key to Eldoria's survival. And I," he declared, his gaze locking onto Ilara's, brimming with raw, undeniable emotion, "I choose her, not out of duty, but out of a profound and unyielding love that defies all your ancient traditions." A collective gasp ripped through the hall, followed by an outraged roar from Elder Theron and a choked cry of fury from Lady Seraphina, who now lunged forward, only to be restrained. Kaelin, oblivious to the chaos, pulled Ilara closer, his thumb brushing a tender circle on her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "You are my destiny, Ilara," he whispered, his voice for her ears alone, yet vibrating with an intensity that promised forever. Then, before the stunned court, he lowered his head, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was neither chaste nor ceremonial, but raw, passionate, and utterly possessive. It was a kiss that shattered centuries of prejudice, a public declaration of a love forged in fire, sealing their fates not by ancient law, but by an undeniable, heart-stopping choice. The world outside them faded, leaving only the fierce beat of their two hearts aligning, irrevocably bound. As their lips parted, a shimmering cascade of golden light erupted from Ilara, enveloping them both, then spreading throughout the hall, a warm, resonant hum of ancient magic. It flowed past the stunned elves, reaching the Fey envoys, whose eyes widened in awe and reverence. The Fey prince, sensing the shift, stirred in his nursery, his volatile magic calming into a gentle, steady thrum. The prophecy was fulfilled, not by bloodline, but by choice and genuine connection. The king, a rare smile gracing his weary face, raised a trembling hand in blessing, his silent approval resonating more powerfully than any decree. The ancient rift between the elves and Fey began to mend, a fragile but undeniable peace settling over Eldoria, born from an impossible love that defied all expectations. Their union, once a forced pact, was now a true, magical binding. With peace restored, Eldoria's crystalline spires shone with the light of a shared future. Ilara, once an outcast, now walked beside Kaelin, her hand in his, a testament to a love that defied ancient traditions and forged new paths. Their life together, woven with deep respect and undeniable passion, found its rhythm within the palace. A true home. The gnawing solitude was banished, replaced by profound belonging, and the quiet promise of new life stirred within Ilara, a tangible symbol of their unbreakable bond. Beneath the starlit sky, two souls, once fractured, now shone as one. A new dawn broke, painting the world with hues of hope. Their love, an epic ballad, echoed through the ages. This story ends, but many more are waiting for you, our community. Next week, a lost Fey artifact will awaken something even more dangerous, threatening Eldoria's newfound peace. Like this story, if it captivated you, our loyal subscribers, and subscribe for the next one, sis, ensuring you don't miss